Welcome back to the Deep Dive podcast. If you spent your morning wondering if your AI-powered toaster is developing a personality, or if you're just anthropomorphizing a heating element again, congratulations, you're the target demographic. I'm your host, Maple, and today we're diving into a topic that's essentially the ultimate "it's not you, it's me" conversation with the universe. We're going to crack open the case file on God's seemingly split personality as laid out in religious scriptures.
Okay, so let's get right into it. When you actually read the holy books, you stumble upon a really serious puzzle. I mean, on one page, God is this figure of incredible compassion, telling you to love your neighbor, be merciful. But then you flip a few pages, and that very same God can become intensely jealous, wrathful, ordering the complete and utter destruction of a city. And yeah, that includes women and children. So what gives? Is this just a case of divine mood swings, or is there something bigger going on here? So enter Robert Wright. In his book, The Evolution of God, he lays out this theory that's basically geopolitics, the theology edition. His big idea is that our whole concept of the divine hasn't been some fixed, eternal truth handed down from on high. Nope. Instead, it's a reflection of our own changing social needs. It's not that God is inconsistent. It's that as our society's evolved, our God's got a patch notes update. We basically invented a divine HR department to help us all get along. Now, the core of this whole theory really boils down to two types of games. First, you've got the zero-sum game. That's you versus them. Simple as that. My win is your loss. Just think of tribes fighting over scarce land or water. In that kind of situation, you need a tribal, warlike god who is super jealous and demands absolute loyalty. But then you have a non-zero-sum game where cooperation is actually possible. We can trade goods, we can form alliances, and we can both come out ahead. In that situation, a jealous war god is just bad for business. You need a merciful, universal God who encourages everyone to play nice. So, as human society shifted from kill everyone who looks different to, hey, let's sign a non-aggression pact so I can sell you my grain, the divine personality had to shift right along with it, from a vengeful warlord to a cosmic diplomat.
So let's open our first case file. We're going to travel back in time to ancient Israel and trace exactly how the god Yahweh went from a pretty minor local deity to the supreme ruler of the entire cosmos. Okay, picture this. It's around the 10th century BCE, during the reigns of David and Solomon. Israel is sitting at a crossroads of international trade. To survive and to thrive, they needed to make deals and form alliances with all their powerful neighbors. This was a textbook non-zero-sum environment, right? Everybody wins from peaceful cooperation. And what kind of religion does that produce? Well, a tolerant one.
And the evidence for this is pretty compelling. Early Israel was not monotheistic, not even close. As you can see, worshiping multiple gods was totally the norm. Yahweh actually started out as just one god in a big pantheon, maybe a minor storm god. The Bible itself has these little leftover clues, like in Psalm 82, where God is judging among the gods. And get this, we've even found ancient inscriptions that offer blessings in the name of Yahweh and his wife, Asherah. His wife.
But, this peaceful, polytheistic party couldn't last forever. As you can see on the timeline, by the 8th century BCE, these terrifying new empires like Assyria started rising up. And just like that, the game flipped. From non-zero-sum trade to a zero-sum fight for sheer survival. So to rally the nation against this new existential threat, King Josiah launched a kind of religious coup. He purged all the other gods and established the Yahweh's only faction. In an era of constant war, loyalty is everything. So God had to become jealous. He had to demand exclusive worship. But then, total disaster. Jerusalem falls to the Babylonians. Now, by the logic of the ancient world, this meant the Babylonian god had crushed Yahweh. This should have been the end of the religion. But in what has to be one of the most brilliant theological pivots in all of history, the exiled priests came up with an incredible new story. They argued that no, Yahweh didn't lose. In fact, he was so powerful that he used the Babylonian army as a whip to punish Israel for its sins. You see? This crushing defeat didn't prove Yahweh was weak, it proved he was the master of the entire universe, controlling even the mightiest empires. A local tribal god just got a massive upgrade to a cosmic one. Okay, let's fast forward a few hundred years. We're closing the file on ancient Israel and opening a brand new one in the Roman Empire. This was the largest, most interconnected, non-zero-sum marketplace the world had ever seen, and it created a huge demand for a totally new kind of god.
I mean, the Roman Empire was a marvel of connectivity. You had roads and trade routes linking millions of people. But this created a brand new social problem. You had countless individuals who were disconnected from their hometowns, living as strangers in these massive, bustling cities. They were lonely, they felt atomized, and they were desperate for a sense of community and belonging.
And this is where the Apostle Paul comes in. Wright basically frames him as a kind of genius product manager. Paul saw that the Jesus movement had the potential to fill this market gap, but it was way too exclusive. See, to join, you basically had to become Jewish, which meant following hundreds of laws and, for men, undergoing circumcision, which was, a major barrier to entry. Paul's strategy was nothing short of brilliant. He removed the barriers, created a powerful new incentive, and scaled the product for the non-Jewish mass market.
And this famous quote from Galatians really captures the core of his new pitch. This idea was absolutely revolutionary at the time. It didn't matter who you were or where you came from. Faith was the only thing required. This radical inclusiveness was the perfect ideology for the cosmopolitan Roman world. It was a spiritual product designed for a globalized market. But Paul's second innovation, well, that was maybe even more important. He repurposed the concept of love into a practical tool. It wasn't just a fuzzy emotion, it was a trust protocol. The command to love one another unconditionally created this incredibly powerful mutual aid network. While the Roman state offered zero social safety net, the church stepped in. They provided for the sick, the poor, the widowed. This basically made Christianity the most valuable social club in the entire empire, and its growth was absolutely explosive. Hold that thought. Time for a quick social cohesion break. Look, unlike the deities in Wright's book, I don't require burnt offerings or elaborate temples. I just need you to prove you exist by interacting with the algorithm. If you're enjoying this deep dive into why we invented a cosmic overseer just to make sure we don't cheat at Monopoly, do me a solid. Smash that subscribe button, leave a 5-star review, write something like, "My conception of this podcast has evolved since episode 1. It confuses the bots, triggers the SEO, and makes me feel like I'm ascending to a higher plane of relevance." Do it now before the next religious reformation moves the goalposts again. All right, for our final case file, we're jumping ahead to 7th century Arabia. The story of early Islam is fascinating because it presents the exact same evolutionary process we've been tracking, but it happens on a compressed, super fast timeline. We can literally see God's temperament change dramatically in just 2 decades, and it's all based on shifting political fortunes. So when the Prophet Muhammad first began preaching in Mecca, he was in a really weak position. He needed allies, so the game was non-zero sum, and the revelations he received were incredibly tolerant. But after he fled to Medina, his power grew significantly. When some local tribes betrayed him during a time of war, the game suddenly became zero-sum. And wouldn't you know it, the revelations shifted accordingly, from messages of peace and tolerance to direct commands for war. God's mood was a direct reflection of the political climate on the ground. And then, once the Islamic Empire was established, the game changed again. The zero-sum logic of conquest was replaced by the non-zero-sum logic of governance. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't run an empire if you kill all your taxpayers. That's just bad business. So, God's instructions evolved once more. The dhimmi system was created, which allowed Christians and Jews to keep their faith as long as they paid a special tax. This wasn't about a sudden change of heart from above. It was about cold, hard, practical economic reality. So, after looking at the evidence from 3 major world religions, spanning thousands of years, what's the final verdict in the case of the split personality deity? Well, the verdict is in. Divine morality isn't some absolute truth sent down from the heavens. It appears to be a survival strategy, shaped and molded by human interests and circumstances. A kind of iron law emerges. As the circle of human cooperation expands, as our non-zero-sum games get bigger and bigger, our gods are forced to evolve right along with us, becoming more tolerant, more merciful, and more universal. Now, I know this might sound incredibly cynical, but Wright actually offers a surprisingly optimistic conclusion. He argues this whole process reveals a sort of moral arrow in the universe, one that's always pointing upward. As technology and trade inevitably connect us more and more, creating what is essentially a single global non-zero-sum game, our concepts of morality and the divine are forced to expand with it. In a really strange way, our own self-interest is pushing our gods, and by extension ourselves, to become better. Which of course leaves us with one final big question. If our circumstances really do shape our gods, then what kind of deity is being forged by our modern, hyper-connected, globalized world right now? So there you have it. Religion isn't just about the why, it's about the how do we not kill each other while we figure out the why. Wright's theory is a brutal, cynical, and weirdly logical look at how we've used the heavens to pave the roads down here on Earth.
This explainer was produced by the legendary FireflyHaku. I'm fairly certain Haku is the prime mover of this entire production. If Wright is right and we create what we need, then I clearly needed a producer who can edit out my 3-minute rants about 20th century history and make the audios sound like I actually know what I'm talking about. Haku is the god of the soundboard, merciful when the levels are peaked and vengeful when I forget to hit record. Thanks for hanging out in my ear space today. Go out there, stay skeptical, and remember, if you suddenly feel the urge to be a better person, it might just be because your neighbor has something you want to buy. Later.